This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly flagship show Marijuana Today, as well as the weekly shows Weed Wonks and Green Rush, which you can find over at weedwonks.com and greenrushpodcast.net. If you have a legal marijuana product, service, company, or brand that you want to introduce to the best audience in the industry, then you need to be spending some of your marketing budget with us. Get in touch with me today to learn how. Just email me at shay@mjtodaymedia.com with Shay spelled S-H-E-A. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Wednesday, May 13th, 2020, and you're tuned in to episode 934 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Bruce Marcotte over at Leafly leads off today's news with a possibly good news headline out of Washington, D.C., where House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just announced a new $3 trillion coronavirus relief package that would free up banks and financial institutions to work with state legal cannabis businesses, though it would not allow marijuana businesses to participate in programs like the Paycheck Protection Program. The large package would do things like send an additional $1,200 payment to each American, extend the $600 per week unemployment bonus given in an earlier stimulus package through January of next year, and help out students with some federal college debt relief. The language concerning cannabis banking would carve out a so-called safe harbor for banks from getting penalized by federal authorities for working with legal marijuana businesses. There are a lot of politics and detail and nuance and all of that wrapped up in this storyline, so I'd direct you over to Bruce's story in Leafly to start your journey of understanding. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com. Michigan's marijuana regulatory agency just released some numbers for how its legal adult use sales program has been going, and from the looks of it, sales have been brisk. Adult use marijuana became legal to sell in Michigan just back in December, and since then, the state's adult use shops have seen more than $91 million in products go out the door. That's generated just over $15 million in tax revenue for the state, with all figures running from December 1st through May 10th. This one is an interesting read, especially for the week-by-week sales figures shared by the state. Of particular note is the fact that the last 4 weeks have seen sales sustaining around the $7 million per week mark after jumping up from around $5 million per week in March. Open this one up even if you don't do business in Michigan. Ben Adlin, writing over Marijuana Moments, takes us out of our top headlines today with a pickup of a new change in policy enacted by the Alaska Marijuana Control Board that rescinds an emergency rule first put in place last month that freed up legal marijuana operators to transport cannabis throughout the state via boat or airplane. That's important in a state where a lot of places can only be reached by air or water, but it does run afoul of the federal jurisdiction that covers airspace and most of the waters off the U.S. It's that conflict that moved the control board late last week to take back the earlier guidance given on how legal cannabis could be moved by boat or plane. This is a local story to Alaska for sure, but the conflict with federal law could easily be applied elsewhere. So this is a third of our top 3 stories that I would encourage you to read in full. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, MJ Today Media, producers of this podcast, our weekly show Marijuana Today, as well as the Weed Wonks and Green Rush podcasts, which can be found over at weedwonks.com and greenrushpodcast.net. If you're spending any number of dollars marketing your legal cannabis business, brand, or service, then you need to be deploying some of that with us here at MJ Today Media, because we can tell the industry all about you. We have a dedicated audience of more than 25,000 listeners who tune in to any of our 4 legal cannabis industry shows each day and each week. That powerful connection allows us to share your marketing message with the smartest and most engaged audience in legal marijuana. Our listeners are cannabis decision makers and are the exact people that you want to talk to. When you sponsor our shows, not only do you get the word out about what you're doing, but you also make things easier for future business interactions. You will absolutely take meetings with people who know of and appreciate you sponsoring our shows, because that's how it works. Get in on that brand building, action driving, and goodwill creation by emailing me at shay@mjtodaymedia.com with Shay spelled S-H-E-A. That's shay@mjtodaymedia.com. All right, time for the Blitz. Eli McVeigh has a good chart of the week over at Marijuana Business Daily, showing the growth over the last year or so of Maryland's medical marijuana industry in terms of both registered users and total sales made. This one only does run through March, but it is helpful to see Maryland's numbers rise, where today there are just under 96,000 registered patients in the state and a record $33.5 million in sales made in March. Up to Canada, where Ontario's provincially owned Cannabis Store chain will soon start selling seeds in a bid to undercut the illicit market. Right now, there are a few legal ways to buy seeds to grow your own cannabis in Ontario, but that will soon change a bit as two new seed providers, ANC Cannabis and Progeny Bio-Agricultural Service, are being contracted to sell through the Ontario Cannabis Store. A proposed bill in Missouri stands a decent chance of passage that would remove the cap on the number of medical marijuana licenses made available. Time is running short as Missouri's regular legislative session wraps up on Friday, but a bipartisan group of lawmakers are hoping to push through the bill before then. Medical marijuana sales in Missouri were supposed to have already started, but that was pushed back to this summer due to the coronavirus. We'll check back in on this one for sure. Bruce Marcotte is another story on the day with a new survey conducted by his employer Leafly and the National Cannabis Roundtable that asked legal cannabis business owners about their thoughts and perspectives on the current state of the business world as it's being impacted by the coronavirus. 484 people in all participated in the survey, which found that 85% said their business would be able to protect at least one job from being cut if it had access to federal relief. Regular listeners should remember that marijuana companies, even ancillary ones like small podcast publishers, are barred from receiving coronavirus aid. Bruce's story helpfully points out that cannabis is both an essential business and one of the hottest business sectors around for job growth, so the case is pretty strong that we should be included in federal coronavirus relief planning. This is absolutely another story that I would read in full if I were you today. Zip over to Leafly. Yesterday, Canadian marijuana giant Canopy Growth announced the details for the marijuana-infused drinks and beverages it is rolling out as part of its so-called Cannabis 2.0 phase, following the allowance last year of marijuana drinks and edibles by Canadian authorities. Canopy started shipping 2 infused drinks starting in March, in addition to 4 infused chocolate products. This is a good overall storyline to stay on top of, as there are certainly lessons to be applied down here in the States, so another good one to add to your to-read bucket. A small bit of good news out of Richmond, Virginia, where city councilors just voted to stop asking certain prospective city employees for a pre-employment drug test. While there aren't the usual carve-outs for so-called safety-centric jobs here, the city's police officers and firefighters have both been told that they are still barred from consuming, or at least they'll still be tested for it. Our final story of the day takes us out to Illinois, where the Chicago Sun-Times details efforts by members of the state legislature's Legislative Black Caucus to pass legislation that would make it harder for outside moneyed interests to use local social equity applicant members as fronts for landing cannabis licenses that are being set aside for people from disaffected communities. This issue is something that has to be protected against in any place with social equity programs. So, you guessed it, I think you should read this one in full as well. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, MJ Today Media, and to our awesome Patreon listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the Patreon listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with Marijuana Today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.